Every morning, we followed the exact same ritual. My 5-year-old son, Ethan, and I would walk hand in hand with Benjamin to the Metro North Station in White Plains. He was immaculate in his gray suit, leather briefcase in hand. He seemed like the perfect husband, the responsible father that any woman would wish to have by her side. He greeted the neighbors with a calculated smile and constantly checked his watch, acting as if he didn't have a minute to lose. Meanwhile, I'd tried not to dwell too much on the monotonous routine that had become ingrained in my skin. Ethan, his small backpack dangling, skipped along the sidewalk, trying to keep pace. Benjamin would lean down to give him a quick kiss on the head before heading to the platform, and I would stay behind, watching him disappear into the commuter crowd. We looked like a normal, almost exemplary family. Yet deep inside, I was starting to feel that something wasn't right. As I walked back through the streets of Yonkers, I wondered if this was truly what life consisted of, accompanying the man who shared my bed every day without questioning what he did once he got on that train. People told me I was lucky, that Benjamin was a serious, hard-working man who provided for his family, ensuring there was always food on the table. And yes, the bills were always paid and the fridge was never empty, but there was a subtle coldness in our home that nobody else saw, an uncomfortable silence in the evenings that I couldn't explain. I faked normality, smiling at my son and preparing breakfast, while deep down a strange feeling lingered, as if the perfect stability we projected was just a facade about to crack. That day, as Benjamin walked a few steps ahead, Ethan squeezed my hand tightly. He forced me to bend down to him, and with a voice barely audible, his trembling lips uttered words that chilled me to the bone. "Mom, I don't want to go home." I froze, thinking he was perhaps just tired or experiencing a childish fear, but his gaze was too serious for a 5-year-old. He looked down at the ground, as if he had committed an act of treason, as if keeping quiet was painful. In his innocence, he seemed burdened by a secret too big for him to handle. The crowd flowed past us, oblivious to the confession that was tearing me in two. I stroked his head, trying to transmit a sense of security, though a growing anxiety was flooding me inside. "Why do you say that, honey?" I asked him tenderly, but he looked away and bit his bottom lip. It was then that he added even lower, "Last night I heard Dad talking about us." My heart leapt, as if a dark shadow had suddenly settled upon our ordinary life. I didn't want to show panic, so Benjamin, who still suspected nothing, wouldn't realize I was starting to discover his true face. I knelt down in front of my son, holding his small shoulders, and with a lump in my throat, I asked him what exactly he had heard. His eyes filled with tears, and in a shaky voice he confessed, "Dad said he doesn't want us at home anymore, and he has a plan with you." Those words echoed in my mind like thunder. I couldn't process it. How could a child invent something like that? What if he had misunderstood? I tried to convince myself it was a mistake, but the certainty in his tone completely disarmed me. The roar of the trains pulling into the station jolted me out of my trance. I hugged my son tightly, and as Benjamin walked away toward the turnstiles, I felt the ground beneath my feet crumble. The figure of my husband, seemingly normal and routine, suddenly became a disturbing enigma. What did that plan mean? Why would he speak of us as if we were an obstacle? My head was spinning with questions, but I had to hide it. Benjamin couldn't suspect that I knew anything. I clenched my teeth, stayed silent, and walked with my son, trying not to show the fear that was tearing me apart inside. When Benjamin looked back to wave goodbye with his usual smile, I forced a calm expression and lifted my hand as I always did. I faked normality, as if nothing had happened, even though my heart hammered violently against my ribs. Instinct told me I had to maintain my composure, because one extra gesture could ignite his suspicion. As he ascended the stairs to the platform, I no longer saw the same man. His silhouette seemed like that of a stranger, capable of concealing something dark. On the way back, still holding my son's hand, I tried to convince him that everything was fine. "Daddy loves you very much. I'm sure you misunderstood," I told him, but my voice sounded hollow, devoid of conviction. The little boy looked at me without answering. And in that silence, I understood that he didn't believe me. A shiver ran down my spine. If Benjamin had really said those words, then we were living under the same roof with someone who was no longer family, but a threat. From that instant, I knew I had to be alert, feigning tranquility while simultaneously starting to look for answers. Instead of going straight home as I always did, I decided to take a detour through the neighborhood streets. I pretended to Ethan that I wanted to buy him a juice box at the corner store, but in reality, I needed time to organize my thoughts. His revelation could not be ignored. Something inside me screamed that I needed to pay attention to every detail. The child's hand was sweaty in mine, and his anxious gaze reflected the fear he still carried from what he had heard. I tried to smile, but my chest felt heavy, as if I were carrying an invisible weight. As we walked, I replayed the phrase over and over. Dad has a plan with you. I couldn't get it out of my head. Maternal instinct compelled me to protect him, even if I didn't know exactly what I was protecting him from. I bought the juice box, hugged him tight, and continued walking with feigned calm, though every step felt eternal. I didn't want Benjamin to discover my distress, because if he was truly plotting something, showing fear might precipitate everything. That afternoon, without saying anything, I decided to observe him through different eyes, as if he were no longer my husband, but a dangerous stranger. As we approached our apartment in Yonkers, my mind was flooded with impossible questions. What if my son had confused a casual conversation? Maybe he had dreamed it, and his childish imagination transformed it into a threat. I wanted to believe that. I needed to convince myself that there was no reason to fear. But the more I thought about it, the stronger the idea that it was real became. His tone of voice, his genuine fear, didn't seem like a child's invention. That night, while preparing dinner, the doubt continued to pound inside me. I watched Benjamin moving around the kitchen as if nothing were wrong, following the same routine, and I wondered if behind every kind gesture was a cold calculation. I tried to distract myself, but the memory of my son's words returned with greater intensity. The silence in the house seemed heavier than ever. Between serving the plates and faking normality, I realized that even though I didn't have proof yet, I could no longer trust him as before. When we got home that afternoon, the first thing that caught my eye was the apartment door. There was a new auxiliary deadbolt that I didn't recognize, installed without anyone telling me anything. Benjamin hadn't mentioned any renovations, and there was no apparent reason to add another security measure. A chill ran down my body, as if that lock represented an invisible border between him and us. Ethan stared at it too, though he didn't say anything, perhaps afraid of reminding me what he had already shared. We went inside, and everything appeared to be in its place. The living room tidy, the table precisely set, the television on as usual. However, that lock weighed on my mind like a silent warning. What or who did he want to protect the house from, or was he trying to protect himself from me? I forced myself to smile, to pretend things were normal, but inside, I no longer felt safe under that same roof. For the first time, I thought that my home, that place which should have been a refuge, might have become a trap. Inside the house, everything seemed normal, but my intuition told me that something was amiss. While Benjamin was in the shower, I took the opportunity to scan the living room with a more careful look than usual. It was then that I noticed a drawer in the sideboard was slightly ajar, as if someone had left it half pushed in a hurry. I approached carefully, trying not to make a sound, and when I opened it, I discovered a thick folder, poorly hidden among old tablecloths and papers. The folder was only halfway in, which made me think it had been used recently. My hands trembling, I touched it and pulled it out slowly, fearing I would find something that confirmed my son's worst fears. As I quickly flipped through the pages, I noticed official seals, signatures, and figures that I couldn't fully understand. A cold sweat broke out because this wasn't routine household documentation. These were serious papers, the kind always kept under lock and key. Something inside me screamed that I had just opened a dangerous door. I locked myself in the bedroom, pretending I was going to change clothes, and opened the folder more carefully. What I found took my breath away. They were life insurance policies, several of them taken out in the past few months. In all of them, I was listed as the insured, but the sole beneficiary was Benjamin. I read the clauses over and over, trying to convince myself that this was normal, perhaps a precautionary measure, but the unsettling fact was that he had never discussed it with me. The dates were recent, too close together, and some policies even duplicated coverage. My heart was beating so hard I could barely focus on the words. I felt as if my entire body was screaming danger, as if every sheet of paper was urging me to flee. I quickly closed the folder and put it back exactly as I had found it, terrified that he would notice any change. I looked in the mirror and saw a reflection I didn't recognize, that of a woman who for the first time doubted the innocence of her own husband. That night, I could barely touch my dinner. While Benjamin talked about trivial things, I couldn't stop hearing the echo of the policies in my head. Why had he taken out so much insurance without mentioning it? Why was I the central piece of all those documents? Every time I looked at him smiling, I felt that behind that gesture was a cold calculation that chilled my blood. I feigned normalcy, but the knot in my stomach wouldn't loosen. When I took my son to bed, I sat beside him, stroking his hair while he slept. The calm of his breathing made the internal storm consuming me even more unbearable. I thought about getting up and running away that very night, but I had nowhere to go and no solid evidence to justify such a drastic decision. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, convinced that I had to buy time and act carefully. The anguish wrapped around me, but it also propelled me to be alert as never before. While preparing my son's afternoon snack in the kitchen, I overheard Benjamin speaking on the phone in the living room. It wasn't the typical work conversation. He spoke in a low tone, but his words cut through the air like knives. "This week, it has to be closed. No one can find out," he said with a firmness that made my skin crawl. I held my breath, afraid that any noise would alert him that I was listening. The knife in my hand trembled as I cut the fruit, and a cold sweat ran down my back. I felt my heart beating at full speed, as if it wanted to escape my chest. I wondered what closed meant and who this hidden caller was. The sound of his approaching footsteps forced me to compose myself in seconds, pretending to focus on the tray I was preparing. When he entered the kitchen, I looked at him, trying not to show nervousness, but nothing in his words could seem innocent anymore. That call had sown the certainty in me that he was plotting something dark. Benjamin hung up the phone as soon as he saw me, as if he wanted to erase the conversation he had just had with a single gesture. He smiled naturally, asking in a light voice what I was preparing for Ethan. I responded calmly, but my hands remained tense on the counter. Every move he made seemed calculated, like an actor playing an overly rehearsed role, and I, forced not to show fear, also became an actress inside my own house. I offered him a plate as if nothing had happened, and he accepted it with a smile that no longer convinced me. The scene was almost absurd, two adults sharing a fictitious normalcy, while one hid secrets and the other pretended not to know them. Inside, the deception hurt, but I understood that I had to wait, observe, and gather proof. If I showed my suspicion too early, I could lose everything. That night, while doing the dishes, I promised myself I wouldn't let my guard down for a second. That night, I pretended to be sound asleep, but my eyes remained slightly open, attentive to every movement. Around midnight, Benjamin turned on his laptop and began typing quickly. The light from the screen illuminated his serious, concentrated face, as if he were handling information he couldn't share. I played dead, resisting the urge to sit up and ask what he was doing. From the bed, I watched him delete search histories and move files with suspicious care. My slow, steady breathing was my only mask, while anxiety gnawed at me inside. I watched him turn off the computer with a dry gesture, putting it away in his briefcase as if it were treasure. Afterward, he lay down next to me and hugged me, perhaps trying to project the image of a loving husband, but I could no longer feel warmth in his arms, only a sharp coldness that reminded me of what I had discovered. That dawn, I understood that trust had died forever and that I had to prepare myself for the truth that was about to come to light. The next morning, while dropping Ethan at school, one of the mothers approached me with a nervous expression. She spoke in a low voice, as if afraid of being heard. "Be careful with your husband. He's getting into strange things," she whispered to me. I was paralyzed, unable to react, trying to figure out where that warning had come from. Her serious gaze, heavy with concern, confirmed that it was no joke. I asked what she meant, but the woman evaded the topic and left quickly. I stood motionless for a few seconds, my heart racing, watching her disappear into the commotion of parents at the entrance. Those words hit me like confirmation of what I already suspected. Benjamin was hiding more than I could imagine. I walked back home with a knot in my stomach, reviewing every detail of the past few days. The suspicious call, the insurance policies, the new lock, everything fit together into a single disturbing puzzle. I felt fear, but also an urgent need to uncover the truth. That very afternoon, when Benjamin left for work, I sat down in front of his computer with trembling hands. I didn't know if I would be able to access it, but I needed answers. I checked his online bank accounts and discovered regular transfers made out to a woman I didn't know. They weren't huge sums, but enough to raise suspicion. I felt instant vertigo. Not only did he seem to be hiding a plan against me, but he was also diverting money to someone else. I bit my lip, trying not to cry, but rage flooded me. Who was this woman? What was her role in all of this? I saved screenshots onto a flash drive, which I hid among my things, fully aware that I was entering dangerous territory. I quickly closed the computer just before Benjamin returned and forced myself to smile as if nothing had happened. Inside, however, distrust had taken deep root. There was no turning back now. I needed the truth, even if it destroyed me. The following days confirmed what I feared. Benjamin was not only plotting something dark against me, he was also cheating on me with another woman. I discovered it when I saw an email open on his cell phone, which he had forgotten on the table. In the message, she wrote to him with confidence and complicity, mentioning plans together and thanking him for the money received. I felt like the world was collapsing, as if all the walls of my house had instantly fallen down. The betrayal was not just financial or emotional, it was a total deception. I moved away from the phone just as I heard his footsteps, pretending I was folding laundry. My insides were burning, but in his presence, I continued to play the role of the compliant wife. It pained me to imagine how many times he had looked me in the eye while lying without blinking. The double betrayal was unbearable. Not only was my life in danger, but my dignity as a woman was also being trampled. That night, as I listened to him snore, I swore I wouldn't give up. I had to find out how far his deception went and how I could protect my son and myself. That afternoon, while folding clothes in the bedroom, I felt small arms clinging to my waist. It was Ethan, who looked at me with eyes full of fear. In a trembling voice, he said, "Mom, don't tell Dad anything." "I'm scared." Those words pierced me like a dagger. A 5-year-old child shouldn't carry such anguish, but he already understood more than I myself wanted to accept. I knelt down, hugged him, and silently promised him I wouldn't leave him alone. The innocence in his voice was confirmation that I had to act with caution, if even he perceived the danger. I couldn't keep denying the reality. I stroked his head and reassured him with a forced smile, swearing that everything would be all right. But desperation was boiling inside me. I had to protect him, even if it meant pretending for Benjamin every second of the day. My son's counsel became a warning. Staying silent was the only way to buy time. I decided that we needed a safe place, even if only temporarily. I told Benjamin that Ethan had a cold and that we would spend a few days at my sister's house so he could rest. I feigned maternal concern, and surprisingly, Benjamin raised no objections. Perhaps he was even grateful for my absence, which confirmed to me that he had something underway. I packed a small bag with essentials and left with my son's hand in mine, feeling like I was escaping an invisible prison. At my sister's house, I found a respite, but also the need to continue pretending. I couldn't tell her the whole truth because I feared Benjamin would find out and react even worse. I only told her that I needed company and a little peace. During those nights, I slept a little more soundly, knowing that for a few days, at least, my son and I weren't under the same roof as that man. However, Benjamin's shadow continued to pursue me like a ghost that never disappeared. One afternoon, while collecting laundry hung on my sister's balcony, I received an unexpected visit from a neighbor. She quietly told me that she had seen Benjamin enter our apartment building, accompanied by an unfamiliar woman. My heart sank, but I feigned indifference so she wouldn't suspect how much it hurt. The description matched the person I had seen mentioned in his bank transfers. My stomach clenched at the thought of her in my house, taking a place that belonged to me. I didn't say anything, only nodded and thanked her for the information. But inside, I felt a whirlwind of rage and helplessness. I retreated to the bathroom so my son wouldn't see me cry. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was a proven fact, being flaunting in my own home. As I looked in the mirror with silent tears, I realized I couldn't remain still. Benjamin wasn't just planning something against me, he had also erased all trace of respect in our marriage, and that gave me more strength to resist. One night, unable to withstand the uncertainty any longer, I secretly returned to our apartment. I left my son with my sister and climbed the stairs with a pounding heart. From the interior courtyard window, I could see the illuminated living room. Benjamin and the same woman from the bank transfers were there, sitting on the sofa, laughing with glasses of wine in their hands. The scene hit me like a brutal slap. My home no longer belonged to me. He had handed it over to another. I remained motionless, the cold cement seeping into my bones, unable to look away from that blatant betrayal. The way he looked at her left no doubt. It was more than an affair. It was complicity. I felt a mix of rage, humiliation, and fear. If he was capable of opening the doors of my house to her, he was also capable of executing any plan against me without remorse. I left with contained tears, swearing that this would be the last time I watched him from a distance without doing anything. A few days later, hiding again near the entrance of the building, I overheard what I needed to confirm my worst suspicions. The woman, her voice confident, told Benjamin, "Once she signs the papers, everything will be ours." That phrase froze my blood because it aligned with the policies I had seen and every suspicious gesture. This was no longer just infidelity, it was a full-blown conspiracy. Their laughter pierced my chest like knives. I put my hand over my mouth to stifle a scream, aware that if they discovered me, I would be lost. I struggled to breathe and had to lean against the wall to keep from collapsing. At that moment, I understood that my life was in genuine danger. That these were not my imagination or my son's fears. This was a gruesome plan that was already in motion. I ran without looking back, determined not to let Benjamin destroy me. The time had come to act. With trembling hands and nerves on the verge of collapse, I gathered the insurance policies and the screenshots of the transfers. I went to the nearest police precinct with the feeling that I was carrying a bomb in my purse. As I told my story, the officer listened attentively, though his furrowed brow showed incredulity. "It could just be economic fraud," he said, "but we don't have proof that he plans to physically harm you." His words felt like a splash of cold water. I felt the ground open beneath my feet, as if the system was denying me the protection I so desperately needed. I begged him to take my full statement, to at least record everything I had seen. The officer agreed to register the complaint, but warned me that without further proof, it would be difficult to act. I left the precinct with a lump in my throat, holding my son's hand and promising myself that I wouldn't give up. If justice hesitated, I would find a way to prove it. The officer looked at me with a mix of compassion and skepticism. He explained that without direct evidence of an attempted assault, what I had could only be considered suspicion. His words hurt me because I felt that my fear and my son's were being reduced to simple conjectures. I tried to insist, recounting every detail from the new lock to the hidden folder. However, he only nodded as if he were obligated to listen, but with no real intention of acting immediately. I left the precinct feeling that justice had left me alone in the face of danger. I walked down the street with a heavy heart, squeezing my son's hand as he asked if we were safe now. I didn't have the courage to lie to him with a yes because I knew we were still exposed. The incredulity of those people became another blow, a reminder that I had to be the one to find the definitive proof. From that instant, I decided I wouldn't wait for others to protect me. I would expose Benjamin myself. Upon arriving at my sister's house, I remembered something Ethan had told me days ago. One night, while playing with his tablet, he had accidentally recorded part of a conversation between his father and that woman. I asked him to show me, and with his small, unsure fingers, he opened the audio file. In the recording, Benjamin's voice was clearly audible, deep and confident, saying, "Once she signs the will, everything will be ready." That phrase was enough to confirm my suspicions. I shuddered upon hearing it, as if a deadly cold ran down my spine. The recording was short but sufficient to prove that there was a concrete plan. I hugged my son, silently grateful that his innocence had become the key I needed to unlock the truth. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had a weapon against Benjamin, something he couldn't deny or dismiss as chance. I carefully put the tablet away, knowing that this file was my salvation and perhaps proof that could cost us dearly if he discovered it. I reviewed the audio over and over, noting every word, every pause. It was the missing piece of the puzzle. I decided to go back to the precinct the next day with the recording in hand. That night, I barely slept, thinking about how Benjamin would react if he suspected I had proof against him. Every noise in the street seemed like a warning, every shadow behind the window a reminder that we weren't safe. My son slept beside me, and I kept vigil with the tablet pressed against my chest. The next day, the detective listened to the recording, and his face changed immediately. Incredulity gave way to absolute seriousness. "This is different," he admitted while taking quick notes on his computer. I felt a bitter relief. Finally, someone recognized the real danger we were in. They promised me they would open a formal investigation, but warned me that I must act as if I knew nothing. I left there with a mix of fear and determination, knowing that this evidence was our only hope. After handing over the recording, the police decided to act cautiously. They explained that they would organize silent surveillance on Benjamin to confirm his movements and contacts. They asked me to continue with my life as normal, as if I knew nothing, even though that was unbearable for me. Every time I saw him smile or kiss our son, I felt it was part of a gruesome theater. I had to fake calm, but a constant storm raged inside me. The officers installed discreet surveillance near our apartment. I knew they were watching from afar, though they never showed it. It felt strange to walk down the street feigning routine when I was actually surrounded by a secret protection plan. Fear consumed me, but it also gave me strength. I wasn't completely alone. Each day that passed was a battle between appearing normal and resisting the urge to confront him once and for all. One afternoon, I received a call from Detective Miller. He informed me that Benjamin had been observed in a bar in downtown Newark meeting with an unknown man. Apparently, they were discussing the details of a supposed home accident. The news took my breath away, confirming that my suspicions were not exaggerations, but a real plan. The detective assured me they now had enough proof to intervene. I listened with a dry throat, as if the air had been ripped from me suddenly. I pictured Benjamin sitting calmly, planning my death as if it were just another item on his agenda. The pain was indescribable, but I also felt a strange relief. His arrogance had betrayed him. That public meeting became the mistake that sealed his fate. The officers asked me to stay strong and not change my behavior until they acted. It was the most agonizing weight of my life. Every second spent with him felt like walking on a cliff edge. The final call came on a gray morning. Detective Miller informed me in a firm voice, "Ma'am, you can rest easy. Benjamin has been arrested." I stood in silence, unsure whether to cry from relief or scream with rage. They had arrested him in the same bar just as he was trying to finalize the details of how to disguise his crime as an accident. Finally, the nightmares seemed to have an end, although scars impossible to erase remained inside me. I hung up the phone and collapsed onto the floor, my son looking at me, scared, not fully understanding what was happening. I hugged him with all my strength, swearing that he was safe now, that no one would ever harm us again. Inside, however, I knew this wasn't the end of the story. I had to face the legal process, the questions, and the social judgment. But on that day, the only thing that mattered was that the threat had disappeared. I could breathe again, even through tears. When I confirmed Benjamin's arrest, my entire body broke down. I didn't cry out of love, but out of rage and the humiliation of having shared my life with a man capable of planning my death. It hurt to remember every moment of trust, every fake smile with which he had deceived me for years. I felt that my marriage had been nothing more than a carefully constructed lie. Everything was collapsing around me like a house of cards. I took refuge in my son's arms, finding in his innocence the only truth that still remained intact. I cried inconsolably, releasing all the pain I had silently held inside. It was a cry that mixed fear, rage, and relief, a catharsis that emptied me out. I understood that man no longer existed for me, that I had to bury him in my memory like a dangerous stranger. In that emotional collapse, all that was left for me was to get up again and rebuild myself from the ashes. As the days passed, I began to regain strength thanks to the support of my sister, Sarah, and the counselors who offered me help. There were nights when I woke up sweating, reliving scenes of betrayal. But little by little, I learned to control it. I repeated to myself that I had survived, that I was still alive, and that was the most important thing. I no longer wanted to be a victim, but an example for my son that one can overcome even the worst nightmare. I began to organize my life away from Benjamin. I opened a new bank account, moved apartments, and looked for a different school for Ethan. Every decision was a step toward freedom, toward a life without fear. I discovered an inner strength I never imagined having, that of a woman who had hit rock bottom and now was rising with more dignity than ever. I understood that it wasn't just about surviving, but about being reborn with my head held high. Today, when I accompany my son to the station, I no longer do it to see off a traitor, but to remind him that together we survived the worst betrayal. We walk hand in hand, and in his smile, I find the certainty that the future belongs to us. We have left the fear behind, though the scars remain as a reminder of what we lived through. Every step we take is a victory against the pain that tried to destroy us. I look in the mirror and see a different woman, stronger, more aware, more in control of her destiny. I don't need anyone's approval because I have learned to trust myself. My son is my driving force and my reason to keep going. The past is behind us, and in its place, the hope of a new life flourishes. That is my rebirth, the certainty that the darkness can never extinguish the light of those who refuse to surrender. I woke up one morning with the sun streaming through the window, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe without fear. The silence of the house was no longer a threat, but a haven of peace. I calmly prepared breakfast, enjoying the aroma of the coffee as if it were a forgotten luxury. Ethan entered the kitchen smiling, and that smile was the best proof that we were safe. As the weeks passed, I understood that the wound would take time to heal, but it wouldn't define me. Every passing day, I found a new reason to get up with determination. I no longer saw myself as a victim, but as a woman who had survived the unthinkable. I had learned to look toward the future with courage, even though the past still stung like a knife. My nights were no longer filled with nightmares, but with plans. I thought about moving to another city, starting over far from everything that reminded us of Benjamin. I dreamed of giving my son a peaceful life, with laughter instead of secrets, with sincere hugs instead of heavy silences. Hope was becoming our new home. One day, walking with Ethan through Central Park, I realized that we were laughing together again, without fear. He ran among the trees, free with the joy natural to his age. I watched him and felt immense pride. I had managed to protect him from the darkness, even if the price had been high. That park became a symbol of our rebirth. I also understood that I had to forgive myself for not having seen the signs sooner. For years, I blindly trusted a man who was deceiving me, and that guilt tormented me. But I realized that true strength consisted in accepting mistakes and rising stronger. I was not a broken woman. I was a reconstructed woman with scars that told her story. The legal process against Benjamin was long and painful, but every hearing was a reminder that justice, though delayed, could prevail. I attended with my head held high, never looking down, because I knew the truth was on my side. I didn't do it just for myself, but for my son, so he would know that one must always fight for dignity. Today, I look to the future with hope. I know that life will present us with more challenges, but I no longer fear the darkness. I have discovered a strength I never imagined having, and an unwavering love for my son that pushes me forward. Our story does not end with pain, but with a rebirth full of possibilities. And every step we take together is proof that no one, no matter how great the betrayal they attempt, will ever be able to take away our light.